Hey, horror lovers. One ghost never moved on from her final chime. The other crawls from soot and ash once a year to collect her offering. They don't haunt houses. They haunt people. Like and subscribe if you enjoy these horror stories, and let me know in the comments which tale stayed with you the longest. Your support keeps the nightmares coming. Let the horror begin. They said the tower hadn't worked in years. The gears were rusted, the clock face cracked, and no one had gone up there since the old caretaker died. But the bell still rang at midnight, and every time it did, someone vanished. I moved to Belgrave last fall, just after my dad passed. The town was quiet. Too quiet, really. My uncle gave me a place to stay while I sorted through things. A small room above his bookstore, which sat just 2 blocks from the tower. It stood like a spine against the sky, tall, blackened with age, topped with a spire and 4 broken clock faces staring out in different directions. The first night, I didn't notice the bell. The second night, I heard it. One loud chime, deep and cold, at exactly 12 a.m. By the end of the week, I couldn't not hear it. It felt like it was echoing inside my chest. Then people started disappearing. Always one at a time. Always after the bell. No one in town wanted to talk about it. If you asked, they'd just say, "People leave." It's a hard place to stay. But their faces told another story. Eyes that darted away. Hands that tightened around coffee cups. Lips that pressed shut, even when you begged for answers. It wasn't until I met Elsie that things started to make sense. She was in her 60s, ran the antique shop next to the post office. One day, I was looking through a box of postcards, and I mentioned the tower. She went still, her fingers frozen over a glass paperweight shaped like an owl. "You've heard her, haven't you?" she asked. I thought she meant the bell. She didn't. "She used to live up there," Elsie said. "Decades ago, back when it was a home, not just a clock." I asked who. She whispered, "The widow." According to Elsie, the tower once belonged to a watchmaker named Callum Breyer. He built it with his bare hands, gear by gear, stone by stone. He lived there with his wife, Clara. But Clara was not well. She was quiet, strange, the kind who stood too long at windows and talked to things that weren't there. They had no children, just the 2 of them, locked in that tower like a fairy tale gone sour. One stormy night, Callum fell from the bell platform. The town buried what was left. Clara never left the tower after that. She said the clock would bring him back, Elsie told me. She said time wasn't finished with them. Weeks later, smoke started rising from the tower again. People heard the bell even though the gears had stopped. Then children started going missing. Teenagers, drifters, always after the midnight chime. By the time the town worked up the courage to go in, the tower was empty. No Clara, just a single red dress hanging from the rafters, and one chair sitting in the middle of the bell room, facing the clock. That was 40 years ago. I didn't want to believe it. But the bell rang again that night, and someone else disappeared. This time it was someone I knew. Jessie. Worked at the bookstore with me. We weren't close, but she was kind, soft-spoken. She always stayed late to finish inventory, and I offered to walk her home more than once. But she'd always smile and say, "Not scared of bells, are you?" She went missing after her shift. They found her phone in the alley. The lock screen showed 12:01 a.m. That was when I made up my mind. I was going up there. The door to the tower wasn't even locked, just warped shut with age. It groaned when I pushed it open, and the smell that hit me was awful, like mold and copper. The staircase wound upward in a tight spiral, every step creaking under my weight. Cobwebs brushed my arms. The walls were carved with deep lines like someone had scratched them endlessly, not words, not symbols, just patterns. The higher I climbed, the louder I heard it. A ticking sound, not from the clock, from something deeper, more alive. At the top was the bell room. It was exactly as Elsie described. One chair, one massive gear system, still rusted, broken, and hanging from the wooden rafters above, strips of red fabric, like pieces of a dress pulled apart over time. I turned to leave, but then I saw the mirror. It stood in the corner, tall and old. The frame was made of brass, covered in dust. And in the reflection, I wasn't alone. A woman stood behind me. She wore a red dress, but her face was in shadow. Her arms hung at her sides, long fingers curled like dried leaves. I turned. Nothing there. I looked back, still in the mirror. Closer now. Her mouth began to move, slow and soundless. I heard her voice, not aloud, but inside my head. You turned the time forward. You owe it back. The mirror shattered. I ran. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next either. But I kept hearing her voice, especially near midnight. And then, like clockwork, someone else vanished. This time, a man in his 70s. He lived alone. No enemies. Gone without a trace. I went back to Elsie. I told her everything. She nodded slowly and said, "She doesn't kill at random. She collects what time took from her. Every chime is a payment." I asked, "Payment for what?" Elsie just said, "You'll know when she calls your name." That was 3 days ago. I haven't left my apartment since. I covered the windows, unplugged the clock, turned off every device. But last night, the bell rang at 12 a.m., and the mirror in my hallway, the one I never moved in, was fogged from the inside. Written across it in long, streaked letters were 4 words. "It's your turn next." My grandfather used to warn us about the Chimney woman. He was a quiet man most of the year, but something always changed in him when Christmas approached. He'd lock the flue, drape a wool blanket over the hearth, burn candles instead of using the fireplace. It seemed like superstition, just one of those strange things older people did without explanation. But he wasn't just paranoid, he was terrified. When I was a kid, I thought it was just one of his weird stories, something to scare us into behaving. He used to say, "She comes down quiet." Not to leave gifts, but to take someone back with her. The story went like this. In the winter of 1961, a house near the edge of town caught fire on Christmas Eve. It was a small place, single-story, old stone chimney, nestled between the woods and a long stretch of quiet farmland. The woman who lived there was named Marion Delaney. People said she wasn't quite right, lived alone, talked to herself, always had smoke curling from her chimney, even in the summer. Kids whispered that she was a witch, though no one ever proved anything. One night, the fire started from inside her chimney. It spread fast. The neighbors said they heard her screaming, not for help, but for forgiveness. When they got there, the place was already ash. Her body was found near the fireplace, curled up and burned black. The only thing left untouched was a single red wool slipper sitting in the center of the hearth. A week later, the boy who first found her house burned down went missing. They found soot on the windowsill and a faint black handprint on the inside wall of his fireplace. Since then, the story had a pattern. Every year on Christmas Eve, someone in town went missing. Always someone with a working chimney. Always someone who went to sleep alone. No signs of forced entry. No noise. Just gone. The only thing left behind was a single red slipper, covered in ash. I never believed it until last year. My name's Tyler. I was 24, renting a small fixer-upper just outside town, working 2 jobs and spending most nights alone. My girlfriend had gone to visit her parents for the holidays, and I stayed behind for work. Christmas Eve was just another night to me. No tree, no stockings, just leftover pizza and a few drinks. Around midnight, the power flickered. The radio cut off and the heater stopped humming. I figured it was just the storm rolling in. Wind had been knocking branches around all day. But then I heard something from inside the wall. A scraping sound, sharp, slow, coming from the fireplace behind me. At first I brushed it off. Maybe debris. A squirrel. Something loose in the flue. But then it happened again. Louder. Heavier. Like something was climbing down. I stared at the brick frame. My heart started pounding, but my brain tried to rationalize it. Old houses make noises, I told myself. But this wasn't random creaks. It was deliberate, rhythmic, getting closer. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward the hearth. I knelt down and shined the beam up into the chimney. Nothing but brick and darkness. No movement, no sound. But then the light hit something. Fingers. Pale, ash-covered fingers curled around the edge of the flue, just sitting there, motionless, as if waiting for the light to find them. I stumbled back and dropped the flashlight. By the time I grabbed it again and looked, the fingers were gone. I didn't sleep that night. I pushed the couch against the fireplace, left every light on, even turned on the oven just to keep the heat running. But nothing happened. Not until morning. At 7 a.m., I got a call from my landlord. He sounded panicked, breathless. He asked if I'd seen his son. I hadn't. He said his kid had come by the property late the night before to drop off a Christmas gift for me, a small wreath he made at school. I looked outside. Sure enough, there it was, leaning against the door, dusted with frost. I told him I hadn't heard anything. But as I turned back into the house, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A single red wool slipper, sitting right in the middle of the floor, in front of the now empty fireplace. That's when I remembered what Grandpa used to say. She doesn't always take the person living there. Sometimes she takes the one who visits. I moved out the next day, but this year I decided to look deeper into it. I went to the town archives. Most people rolled their eyes when I asked about the chimney woman, but one librarian, an older lady named Rose, took me aside. She said the legend was real, though people tried to bury it. Said it was just easier that way. No one wanted to believe something supernatural could be tied to such a normal thing as a chimney. She handed me a folder. Inside were copies of missing persons reports, all from December 24th, going back to 1962. At least one every year. In every report, the scene was the same. No sign of forced entry, no clear suspect, and always a fireplace in the home. She told me one more thing. A survivor. In 1974, a teenage girl was the only known person to survive a visit from the chimney woman. Her parents were out. She was home alone. That night, she smelled smoke, but there was no fire, just this thick, choking ash floating in the living room. She blacked out. When she came to, she was lying by the fireplace, covered in soot. No injury, just a whisper still echoing in her head. Next year, not you. She's lived in a nursing home ever since, never celebrates Christmas, never turns on the heat, and she always sleeps with her bed facing away from the fireplace in her room. This year, I moved into a place without a chimney, but I still check the flue covers, still keep a wool blanket over the stove vent. And every year, as the night creeps in, I think about that slipper. She doesn't stop, she just waits for the right soul to pull down the smoke and follow her back up